Questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Who cares, Mr. Speaker? Monsieur le Président, le Premier Ministre.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised that he would negotiate in our favor before July 21st, but there haven't been any wins. The Americans have doubled tariffs, even though the Prime Minister has made concessions, getting rid of the digital services tax, the counter tariffs. He's even backed down on softwood lumber, but he got nothing in return, except for one thing, a contract from President Trump for Brookfield, an $80 billion contract. Is getting more money for his business the win that he promised Canadians? The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade. Mr. Speaker, as my colleague knows very well, Canadians did not place their trust in his judgment when it came to standing up to President Trump. They didn't trust him not to just sign any old agreement. What we've done is to work hard with the U.S. to find an agreement that will be in the interest of both industries and workers in Canada. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we are taking more measures to help Canadian workers and industries.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, do you want the good news or the bad news? Well, in these times, I guess we'll have to start with the good news. It's all we've got. The good news is that David Eby, the Premier of BC, has absolutely no constitutional authority to block a pipeline. The bad news is that this Prime Minister does. Under Section 9210A of the British North American Act, works between provinces are exclusively the federal government's responsibility. So will the Prime Minister stop hiding behind the powerless Premier, get out of the way, and approve a pipeline to the Pacific today?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I'd invite the member opposite to buy a ticket to Calgary tomorrow to see how a federal government works with the provincial government to build Canada strong.
Leader of the Opposition.
Tomorrow, the Prime Minister will wave around in the air a worthless piece of paper that he says that the Premier of BC can veto any time he wants. Here's the political problem he has. Canadians want a pipeline. They know it's the best way to get our resources to market going around the United States of America, but his Keep It in the Ground caucus is standing in the way. Why doesn't he stand up to them and stand up for Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Speaker, maybe the member opposite should explain to his constituents why the Premier of Alberta wants to stand beside our Prime Minister and talk about how to build Canada strong.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister claimed that he did not have the power to approve a pipeline. Well, too bad for him. The Constitution is public. 9210A says that it is exclusively a federal responsibility. He happens to be the Prime Minister, and he asked us to pass emergency legal powers in C5 to give him the personal authority to overturn any regulation in order to get the project done. In other words, this government has the exclusive power. He has the exclusive legal authority. Will he match that authority with responsibility and approve a pipeline to the Pacific today?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, what this Prime Minister is doing is leading. He's leading on building national projects. He's leading on building port capacity. He's leading on making Canadian steel, lumber, aluminum, and various commodities more available for homes, for big projects, to put people, unionized people, men and women from every part of this country to work building our great country. That's what this Prime Minister is doing. He's leading. What is the Leader of the Opposition doing, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What am I doing? I'm standing in the House of Commons.
Right. Where is he?
Where's Waldo, Mr. Speaker? He's hiding. We know he's in the House of. We know that he's in Ottawa today. We know that he's in the.
I think we're so close to the line there that we're actually stepping over it. So if the honourable opposition leader would continue, but maybe in a different vein.
Mr. Speaker, I think we're finding out that if you're not there, you don't care. Yesterday, the Prime Minister said, who cares that Canadian workers are losing their jobs because he broke his promise to get a deal? We care. Why doesn't he show up and prove he does too?
The honourable government house leader.
I invite the member opposite to buy a ticket and come to Calgary tomorrow and see who cares.
The honourable leader of the opposition.
Well, we've gone from elbows up to who cares under this Prime Minister. Remember, he said he would negotiate a win and he would get a deal by July 21st. Well, still no win, still no deal. He's made concession after concession. He backed down on counter tariffs, on the digital services tax, on the legal action against softwood lumber, and he got nothing in return. Well, one thing. Brookfield, his company, got $80 billion in contracts hand-signed by the president just 20 days after the two met. Is that what he meant when he said he would negotiate a win with Trump?
The honourable minister responsible for Canada-US trade.
Mr. Speaker, I know it's an inconvenient truth for the Leader of the Opposition that Canada right now, today, has the best deal of any trading partner of the United States. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? It's not good enough for Canadian workers, and it's not good enough for Canadian businesses. So unlike the Leader of the Opposition, who would have signed any bad deal put in front of him, the Prime Minister didn't do that. We said we would do the work to support Canadian workers and Canadian industries. We would buy Canadian, be our own best customer, and then negotiate a good deal with the United States.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, in 1995, a Liberal Prime Minister tried to do a fast one in Quebec, essentially cheating, lying, hiding things. And in 2025, will another Liberal Prime Minister once again do the same thing to the provinces in Quebec? Based on a mandate, based on an election where he talked about trade, where actually he's instead looking to benefit American shareholders and himself. Excuse me. The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. I can say for all Canadians, and especially for Quebecers, that I'm not focusing on things that have happened in the past. Instead, I am concentrating on what we can do to make our immigration system strong and to attract the best talents in the world for both Quebec and Canada. Under the Canada-Quebec agreement, Quebec is the one that selects its own permanent immigrants. The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, I'll have to make my question clearer, or make it clear who I'm asking the question. I will have to ask the Minister of Canadian Heritage, the former leader of Équiterre, is he comfortable with the fact that the Prime Minister is trying to get around Canada's legislation in order to push an oil agenda to the detriment of the climate? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. Mr. Speaker, my colleague's question might be more relevant if he hadn't authorized drilling on Anticosti Island, right in the middle of the St. Lawrence. If he hadn't made it so that in Quebec, 50% of the oil is Albertan, all due to the leader of the Bloc Québécois. And perhaps what he's saying would be a bit more relevant if under our budget negotiations, the Bloc Québécois had brought forward a single measure to protect the environment. They did not bring in a single proposal for the environment. That's what we got from the Bloc Québécois. The honourable member. had we brought forward an environmental measure, that would have meant that there was one in the budget. The Minister of Heritage, the former Minister of the Environment, he is a Quebecer. He was a member of the Liberal caucus under Justin Trudeau. Will he solemnly promise to Quebecers and people from BC that he promises, as an environmentalist who used to rappel up buildings in Ontario, that none of these projects will go forward in Quebec or BC without the consent of the province, of Indigenous groups, and social accessibility? Will he promise that that will never happen without that consent? The Honourable Government House Leader. The answer, Mr. Speaker, is yes.
Député de Charlesbourg.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Well, Mr. Speaker, this morning we learned in La Presse that the Liberal member for Laval-Les-Îles is denying that he was involved in the Quebec Liberal Party's leadership race, although he did have a certificate for raising funds. Does the member know that he needs to ask a question about matters that affect the federal government? I think it's pretty clear that my question is about a member that is here across the way, and I think my question is in order. My question is very clear. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that no member of the Liberal caucus has broken federal or provincial laws?
Have some respect, Darrington. Calling the speaker by his first name. Yeah, you have none.
Je vois pas que ça touche vraiment.
I don't think this has to do with any matter of federal government policy. This is a matter of provincial legislation. That was raised in the question, so I don't think that we can allow this question.
De Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles, une deuxième tentative.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking about federal legislation. Let's recall that the former parliamentary leader of the Quebec Liberal Party, Mauro Whiskey, said to Pablo Rodriguez that there were dubious shenanigans happening in Ottawa. I really think that this is pushing it. This is a matter of unproven rumors. This has nothing to do with the federal government's policies. I cannot allow this question. Mr. Speaker, now we see that the Liberals want to move on to a cover-up.
Very South Innisfil.
The Prime Minister says Canadians need to sacrifice more and accept a lower standard of living and quality of life, while he says, who cares about critical trade talks with the U.S., acting more like an advance team for Brookfield and standing up for Canadians. Everywhere he goes, a deal for Brookfield follows while tariffs stay in place or go up. We learned this week that the Prime Minister stands to make millions in bonuses from Brookfield's success. Why does the Prime Minister have his elbows up for him and his Brookfield buddies, but says who cares about Canadian businesses and working families affected by tariffs?
Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Has taken office, that's exactly what he's done. In fact, we stood up for Canadian companies and workers all across this country, and just in a few minutes, the Prime Minister will do it again. He'll stand up for Canadian companies, lumber companies, steel companies, and their hardworking union members that are fighting so hard to protect the economy of their region. Mr. Speaker, why don't they get on board and fight for Canadian families instead of for themselves?
The Honourable Member for Berwick South Innisfil.
So he shrugs off critical trade talks with a smug who cares. Here's something he can't shrug off and everyone should care about. Despite the conflict of interest and ethics screen he has on Brookfield, we found out this week that the Prime Minister met with Brookfield executives behind closed doors in his office in October, proving that his ethics screen is more like a smoke screen. The Prime Minister and Brookfield stand to gain millions from his policies. He knows he can't have any contact with Brookfield, but he met with them anyways. Why would he meet with Brookfield knowing he's barred from having any contact with them?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Speaker, the Prime Minister in a few minutes will be doing his job. He'll be standing up for steel workers. Every project, every infrastructure project in this country depends on one thing, Mr. Speaker, Canadian steel, strong Canadian steels and the workers who produce it, Mr. Speaker. We are strengthening our steel industry, standing by our steel workers, Mr. Speaker. We are investing in our workers. The Conservatives are investing in division.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands.
The Prime Minister has backed down on counter tariffs. He's backed down on the legal challenge against the softwood lumber tariffs, and he's saying, who cares? Now, Canadians thought that he got nothing in his negotiations. It turns out that he just got nothing for Canadians. After his last trip to the White House, he got an $80 billion nuclear deal for his company, Brookfield, which will see the Prime Minister's own personal investments increase in value. So why is it that the Prime Minister is trading our national interests for his own personal financial interests?
The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is standing up today for workers across Canada, for BC Wood, building affordable housing across Canada with BC Wood. He's standing up to reduce the transportation costs across the country, to get BC Wood to build homes across Canada, and to bring steel from central Canada to the east and west more affordably. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is standing up for Canadians today, and we stand with him.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
The Prime Minister's not standing up. He's backing down, like he did on counter tariffs and like he did on the legal challenge for illegal softwood lumber tariffs. But it gets worse when it comes to this Prime Minister's record on Brookfield. We learned that the Liberals gave $500 million to the European Space Agency last week. Guess who owns 50% of the agency's site where the funds are going? None other than this Prime Minister's company, Brookfield. Again, seeing his own personal profits increase at the expense of Canadians, at the expense of Canadian investment and Canadian jobs. Why won't this Prime Minister put Canadians ahead of his own financial interests for once?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, we are in a trade war. While the Conservatives focus on conspiracy theory, our Prime Minister will stand up later today and make...
Not from the top, but the member may continue.
Mr. Speaker, we are in a trade war. While the members opposite engage in conspiracy theories, our Prime Minister will stand up later today and announce major new supports for the forest products industry. On top of $1.2 billion we've already announced, Mr. Speaker. That's how we stand up for Canada.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Prime Minister talked a big game during the election, but has since failed to deliver on the U.S. trade deal. He's backed down on every Trump demand, from the digital services tax to counter tariffs to softwood lumber. He has delivered exactly 0 results for Canadians on the U.S. trade war. But to be fair, he is seeing some results with his Brookfield shares, with the Americans coincidentally signing an $80 billion nuclear deal with his company a mere 2 weeks after his last U.S. visit. So why is it that under this Prime Minister, his financial investments are doing so well, but Canadian workers are being left behind?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservative leader is busy writing letters and debating himself, we're taking action to support Canadian steel and lumber industries and workers. We've got great news. This afternoon, we will introduce and announce new measures to further limit foreign steel imports to ensure that Canadian steel products and producers have better access to the domestic market, become our own best customer by building big with Canadian steel and Canadian lumber, increase protections for Canadian steel and lumber workers and businesses so they can adapt and thrive in this new global landscape. I urge the Conservative leader to tune in, get behind these measures.
L'honorable député de Repentigny.
The honourable member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals want a second dirty oil pipeline. Even with Trans Mountain, they still want more. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump. They want to sell more dirty oil to Asia. And thanks to C5, this pipeline will be able to ignore environmental assessments. It will fill up oil tankers, which will break the law and sail right through a protected marine area. Is there a single Liberal out there with a single shred of conscience? And if so, Will they get up and say that this makes absolutely no sense? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, like I did yesterday, I will speak about the projects that our government is bringing forward in order to build Canada strong. As I said yesterday, if we want to talk about Quebec, we have the project in Saint-Michel-des-Cygnes in Quebec. This is a project that will continue to improve energy storage and electric vehicle batteries. Like all of our projects, we will respect provincial jurisdiction, and we will respect Indigenous rights. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, it is very clear that these Liberals are ashamed. Every time the Liberals hear about their new dirty oil pipeline, they can't wait to change the subject. They know that it's a climate disaster. They know that it's a biodiversity disaster. And they know that there's also the chance of this turning into a financial debacle like Trans Mountain. And yet tomorrow they're going to watch their PM have a photo op with Danielle Smith to announce a pipeline that actually they can't defend at all. We know they're ashamed, but the real question is, do they realize that they are right to be ashamed? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, quite the contrary. We are extremely proud to be contributing to building this country, to building opportunities throughout Canada, like renewable energy throughout the country, like significant projects like the mine my colleague just mentioned. It is the Bloc Québécois that wants to destroy our economy. With them, and then we also have the Conservatives who simply want to open the floodgates. As usual, between the two of them, the Liberal Party is finding the correct middle ground. The Honourable Member for Montmorency-Charlevoix. Well, Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has gone from elbows up to who cares after he failed to sign an agreement on tariffs with the U.S. He backed down on the digital services tax, on counter tariffs, and on the legal measures on softwood lumber. We thought that he hadn't gotten a win, but the truth is that he didn't get a win for Canadians, but the Americans did sign an $80 billion nuclear agreement with the Prime Minister's business, Brookfield. And we know that when Brookfield gets richer, so does the Prime Minister. Why is this Prime Minister sacrificing the interests of Quebecers and Canadians so that he can profit? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister makes a decision, it's in the interest of all Canadians. That is why we've made several trips, although our colleagues don't like that. We've gone abroad to find new investment. That's why this afternoon there's an important announcement, and I hope our colleagues will be paying attention, because there will be announcements on softwood lumber and others to support our industries. That's what we're doing all the time. The Honourable Member for Montmorency-Charlevoix. Well, Mr. Speaker, it takes a lot of work to manage all of the conflicts of interest having to do with Brookfield. The clerk of the Privy Council told us that teams are working around the clock to manage these conflicts of interest. He sold his Brookfield shares to be sure that he meets ethical standards. But the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff has told us that every day he's speaking to the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that everything is under control. The Prime Minister is ending up making tariffs go up every time he leaves the country. He can't seem to get a win for Canadians, and he needs dozens of people to regulate his conflicts of interest. Could he at the very least sell his Brookfield shares and stop being in a conflict of interest every single day? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, every time the Prime Minister leaves the country, it's in order to sign contracts with other countries, to find new markets for our products. Canada has what the world needs, and we will find new partners. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are pretending that they don't understand that, but actually, they do. And I'm honestly saddened to see the pathetic partisan games they're playing. They understand this perfectly well, but they pretend not to.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to trade with the Americans, the Prime Minister went from elbows up to who cares? He backed down on counter tariffs and on legal challenges to softwood lumber and got nothing in return when he went to Washington in October. Well, nothing for Canadians. days later, the Americans signed an $80 billion nuclear deal with the Prime Minister's company, Brookfield. When is this Prime Minister going to get a deal for Canadians and not just a deal for himself and his company?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Conservative cares is like an oxymoron or some pathetic joke, because we know those two terms are like oil and water. They just do not mix. Who cares is our government cares. We're the ones standing up for our industries. We're making more announcements today. The Prime Minister is stepping up with increased protections for our domestic market, with new support for our industries and workers in steel and softwood lumber, and additional commitments to buy Canadian so that we ensure that our workers and industries will thrive for generations to come.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Sturgeon River.
Mr. Speaker, it is being reported that the government's MOU with Alberta includes a multi-billion-dollar investment in carbon capture with Pathways Alliance, the premier carbon capture company connected with Pathways Alliance is none other than Entropy, which is owned by none other than Brookfield. Is the reason it has taken the government so long to get a deal with Alberta because the Prime Minister has been busy getting a deal for Brookfield?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hate to break up their conspiracy theory, but Pathways is actually owned by 6 large oil companies, not Entropy.
Member for St. Albert, Sturgeon River.
Mr. Speaker, the very Brookfield fund that the Prime Minister stands to make millions of dollars in future bonus pay invested $300 million in Entropy. So, in the face of that, can the government provide the assurance that the deal negotiated by the Prime Minister will in no way benefit Entropy and, by extension, the Prime Minister's financial portfolio?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, here we go again, conspiracy theory. We're focused on building Canada. We're focused on working with Alberta to grow our natural resources in a responsible way in consultation with First Nations. That's how we build, not conspiracy theory.
For Mississauga Centre.
Mr. Speaker, young Canadians are ambitious and ready to build Canada's future. Budget 2025 makes generational investments in youth, from Canada Summer Jobs and the Student Work Experience Program to expanded training and apprenticeship opportunities. These aren't short-term fixes. They're building blocks for a lifetime of success. While the opposition talks about cuts, this government's investing in the next generation. Could my good friend and colleague, the Minister of Jobs and Families, tell us how these programs turn ambition into opportunity for youth across Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much to the member for the question. I've had the opportunity of meeting with youth from across the country about the investments that we're making in Budget 2025. $1.5 billion, Mr. Speaker, for youth skills and training, but a very specific program. I met with some members and some members of youth from that member's riding who talked about their excitement and enthusiasm about seeing the Climate Youth Corps in this budget. Mr. Speaker, youth are worried about the climate, and now they have something to look forward to, participating in a program that allows them to use their skills and get paid for them.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Once again, Canadians are finding out that this Prime Minister is all sizzle and no steak. It turns out that his big pipeline announcement won't actually build a pipeline. He's going to have a meeting to set up a plan and then sign a piece of paper that talks about maybe one day putting shovels in the ground. And now he's handing a veto power to the NDP in British Columbia, allowing them to block the whole thing. The Prime Minister is in Ottawa, and we know that he's having trouble with his own caucus on this issue. And now he's ducking the only question that Canadians have. Was yesterday the start of a real pipeline, or just the latest episode in Announce Now and Deliver Never?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I'd invite that member to get a ticket to Calgary tomorrow as well, and they could see why the Premier of Alberta thinks that things have never been so good in Canada.
For Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, that wasn't their answer yesterday. In fact, that isn't what the government said at all when they gave BC the veto in this House. Maybe they need to brush up on the Constitution because Section 92 explicitly gives them the power to build pipelines whether David Eby likes it or not. He also got the legal authority from this House when they asked us to pass Bill C-5 to circumvent their own regulations. And the only thing holding them back now is the same gutless paralysis that kept our oil buried and Canadians with less money over the last 10 years. So instead of hiding behind the premiers, will he get up and announce that he's going to build a pipeline?
Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, they seem determined not to want to see any development in this country. What we understand is it's federal government jurisdiction to approve a pipeline. We also understand that if a proponent wants to take it to the Major Projects Office, we expect them to work in conjunction with the affected jurisdiction and to consult First Nations. The Premier of Alberta understands that. Unfortunately, the members of the opposition don't.
Member for Calgary East.
The Prime Minister is all set to stage a fake pipeline photo op. What he'll probably do is hand the veto power to kill that pipeline to the BC Premier so he doesn't have to do it himself. Section 9210 of the Constitution says the federal government has the sole power to approve interprovincial projects and get shovels in the ground. The only person blocking the pipeline today is this Prime Minister. Will he stand up today and commit to repealing the tanker ban, axing the industrial carbon tax, and actually getting this oil pipeline built?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
What pipelines have they built? Zero.
Mr. Speaker, we learned in the course of the last election campaign that the Leader of the Opposition had in fact never spoken to the Conservative Premier of Ontario, Mr. Ford. Now, I know the Leader of the Opposition to be someone who will look back, maybe look back too often, but he looks very backwards. He'll want to learn from that mistake, and I really suggest he not make that mistake again with the Premier of Alberta. Mr. Leader of the Opposition, please call Danielle Smith.
The Honourable Member for Calgary East.
With the amount of hot air coming out of that member's mouth, I'm surprised the Liberals haven't slapped a carbon tax on it. That answer was as fake as this Prime Minister's promises. Tomorrow, he'll make this grand show and pretend that he wants to get a pipeline built, but he'll hide behind someone else and get them to cancel it so he doesn't have to do it himself. The only person that can get this pipeline approved is this Prime Minister. Does the pipeline need to be sponsored by Brookfield so it actually gets built?
Unfortunately, that plane's going to get pretty full. I invite the member across to buy a ticket and come to Calgary and see what a federal government, how they can work with the provincial government to build Canada strong.
The Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
This Prime Minister promised to build Canada strong, and yet when it comes to a pipeline to BC's coast, a pipeline that could end the U.S. monopoly on Canadian oil and bring billions of dollars into Canada, he transforms into a helpless bystander, hiding behind the NDP Premier in BC, ceding responsibility, abdicating leadership. The Constitution is clear. National pipelines are the sole jurisdiction of the federal government, and failing to act is a betrayal of our national interests. It's a betrayal of our workers, and it's selling out to the Americans. Will they build the pipeline, yes or no?
Yes. The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Mr. Speaker, listen, today's good news for the many companies around the country who are working so hard to stay in business in the middle of this trade war. Whether it's steel, whether it's lumber, Mr. Speaker, we have their backs. And today we're going to talk more about what else we can do, not only to make sure that we protect these companies, but to help them grow their footprint, to sell their product to Canada and around the world. These guys cannot get their head out of the sand, literally, Mr. Speaker, for the sake of the companies right now who need our support. We'll do that work.
Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
You know, Mr. Speaker, maybe if Brookfield proposed a pipeline, we could actually get one backed by this Prime Minister. Let's be clear. A majority of Canadians support this pipeline. A majority of British Columbians support this pipeline. And as long as the world needs these resources, as long as the world needs oil and gas, until that last barrel comes out of the ground, as much of those resources as possible should come from right here in Canada. Why won't this government take up its mantle of leadership, deliver on what it promised, and get this pipeline built?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, news flash, we're in a trade war. We're in a trade war, and we don't get to choose the attitude and the response of other countries. We get to choose what we do in response to protect our industries here in Canada. Tariff-impacted industries know across Canada that this government is standing up to protect their interests at every step along the way. Whether the PM is overseas securing new investments to open up other markets, or whether he's offering new liquidity support and a package to help their businesses get through challenging times, we're steadfast in supporting Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Okanagan Lake West, South Kelowna.
Mr. Speaker, on a pipeline to the Pacific, the Prime Minister finds himself in a dilemma of his own making. He, his ministers, his MPs say one thing in British Columbia and another in Alberta, and now he's perched squarely on the fence. Under Section 9210 of the Constitution, the decision is his government's alone. So will he side with the national interest to build a new pipeline, or will he bow to President Trump and keep a supplicant to American interests instead of diversifying our energy exports?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, maybe we should come at this another way. That member is a British Columbia member. Is he really suggesting, even given the constituents he represents from First Nations, is he really suggesting that the Government of Canada, without the consent of the province of British Columbia, without consultation with First Nations, is in a position to do that? I think he doesn't really mean that. I think he hasn't thought this through, and I think that member, once he does, will come back here and agree that the Government of Canada is pursuing the right path.
Member for Okanagan Lake West, South
The arrogance of that answer, Mr. Speaker. He hasn't spoken to my constituents like I have on this issue. And right now, the only thing that is crossing provincial borders is this Prime Minister's indecision. A pizza shop is more productive than this Prime Minister because at least they know what business they're in and they know they need to deliver in a competitive marketplace. Section 9210 is clear. The power to act is his. So will the Prime Minister stop hiding behind premiers and process, or will he finally stand up for Canada, repeal the shipping ban, axe the industrial carbon tax, and build a new pipeline to the Pacific that is in the national interest?
The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade.
Speaker, we want to thank our colleague in the Conservative Party for that manufactured indignation. And Mr. Speaker, we want to remind him and his colleagues in the Conservative Party that our government made a commitment to Canadians in the last election. It was an election campaign that perhaps they'd prefer to forget. We made a commitment to build the Canadian economy the right way, to build major projects again in a way that respects environmental commitments, our obligations to Indigenous peoples, and working with provinces and territories. They don't like it, Mr. Speaker. We like it, and we're proud to continue to do it.
Hear, hear.
Honourable Member for Calgary Signal Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has stated that he wants to make Canada an energy superpower. Well, good news. This Prime Minister has the power to approve
I could see that coming. I could see that coming. In the business, it's called an applause line. But the member may start from the top. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has stated that he wants to make Canada an energy superpower. Well, good news. This Prime Minister has the power to approve a pipeline to the BC coast. Section 9210 of our Constitution gives the Prime Minister jurisdiction over interprovincial projects like pipelines. not premiers, the Prime Minister. So will he stop passing the buck and approve an oil pipeline to the coast so that we can get this nation-building pipeline built?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister so far has referred $117 billion, $117 billion of projects to the MPO. Maybe this member can join us tomorrow in Calgary and see how this government, with the provinces, is building Canada strong.
Honourable Member for Pickering-Brooklyn.
Mr. Speaker, this week, as we begin the 60 days of activism against gender-based violence, and with today marking Economic Abuse Awareness Day, we are reminded of the countless women, children, and families whose lives have been forever changed by abuse. And we are reminded that this violence doesn't always leave visible scars. It's often hidden behind closed doors, taking the form of control, isolation, and economic abuse that can trap someone in a dangerous situation. Could the Minister of Women and Gender Equality speak to how our government is working to recognize and combat economic abuse and support those who are living through this painful and often invisible form of violence?
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
I thank my honourable colleague for that question. As we mark the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, we recognize the women who built this movement and the work that lies ahead. Our Economic Abuse Awareness Day, we recognize that gender-based violence can be physical, emotional, and psychological. That's why in our budget, we committed to working with financial institutions on a code of conduct to prevent economic abuse, helping them identify it and intervene safely. We will keep working together to end gender-based violence so women can live safely and free from fear. It's unfortunate the members opposite voted against this very measure.
The Honourable Member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister was asked this weekend whether he had spoken to Trump about trade, he said, "Who cares?" Apparently, there is not a burning issue. Well, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives care, and so do the thousands of Oshawa auto workers at the GM assembly plant who are losing their jobs because of the trade war. How can the Prime Minister look Oshawa auto workers in the eye and tell them he doesn't care and that their jobs don't matter?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, great news for the Conservatives. We care. This afternoon, we're going to announce new measures, further limit foreign steel imports to ensure that Canadian steel products have better access to the domestic market, become our own best customer by building big with Canadian steel and Canadian lumber, increase protections for Canadian steel and lumber workers and businesses so they can adapt and thrive in this new global landscape. Mr. Speaker, that leader only cares about himself, squashing a caucus revolt, and thank you.
I mean, we have unfettered freedom of speech in this chamber. I recognize that, but I think both sides have to refrain from provocation. I think that can lead to disorder, which is unparliamentary. But the Honourable Member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, what is clear is that instead of negotiating deals for Canadian auto workers, what they care about, and this Prime Minister cares about, is being more interested in negotiating deals for Brookfield.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oshawa is set to lose thousands of jobs this January, even though this Prime Minister promised to negotiate a win. This is a burning issue for Oshawa auto workers. So why isn't it a burning issue for this Prime Minister?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report that I just recently met with the Unifor Union 222, that's the local chapter at the GM Oshawa plant, and they're happy with what our government is doing to support them. They've said that no deal is better than a bad deal. They've acknowledged our remissions framework and how we've adjusted it, and they are looking to us for leadership and more support. That's exactly what the Prime Minister is announcing later today for tariff-impacted industries. Our government steadfast and strong in support of our workers all across Canada. We won't stand down, and we won't take any lessons from the
honourable member for Niagara Falls, Niagara on the Lake.
Speaker, after 8 months, this Prime Minister has gone from elbows up to who cares when it comes to trade issues with the United States. These comments spark concern in my community, particularly with the thousands of current and former GM workers in St. Catharines who worry about the future of their auto plant. GM has been in St. Catharines since 1929. I can tell you Conservatives care, Canadians care, the workers at these plants who depend on these jobs care. What's it going to take? Does Brookfield have to buy General Motors for this Liberal Prime Minister to finally care?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, we were elected on a plan to build big, Mr. Speaker, and I've met with auto workers from across the country, Mr. Speaker, and they know that we have their backs, Mr. Speaker. In a few minutes, the Prime Minister will be announcing more supports for the auto sector, more supports for the steel industry, because we have their backs. But you know what? More than that, Mr. Speaker, we're building big. We're going to build projects in national interest, homes that skilled workers will use to build across this country, Mr. Speaker. Will the Conservatives get on board?
The honourable member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, in 2011, the Harper Conservative government created the conditions for Driver Inc., an illegal scheme where trucking companies misclassify drivers as independent contractors to avoid paying payroll taxes. This has hurt workers, distorted competition in the market, and deprived the federal government of important revenue that it should be able to use to invest in Canadians. In Budget 2025, our new Liberal government took action to end this scheme. Can the Secretary of State for the CRA please inform the House of the measures our government has taken to end Driver Inc.?
Good question. The Secretary of State for the CRA.
Mr. Speaker, in this historic budget, we are investing new resources to restore fairness to Canada's trucking industry after that party, the Conservatives, broke it. We will lift the moratorium on penalties for unreported fees for service, launch a dedicated compliance program, and expand information sharing with Employment and Social Development Canada. These measures will end the illegal Drivers Inc. scheme and level the playing field for companies that follow the law. The Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois both voted against Budget 2025. It's a shame that they didn't support tax fairness.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent, Akiawenrak. Mr. Speaker, we know the Prime Minister is very familiar with Brookfield, but does he know about PACCAR? It's a business which has been making trucks for decades. Now, they've announced 300 layoffs. So those are people, even parents, losing their jobs. Why? Because of American tariffs. Now, I know that it's not Brookfield at stake, but can the Prime Minister go talk to the workers at PACCAR and tell them who cares? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised by the colleague's question. Yes, we are currently in a trade war, which, yes, was triggered by... Is everyone surprised? But, Mr. Speaker, it's very important to remain level-headed. We can't just sign whatever deal with the United States. As for PACCAR, Mr. Speaker, we're in communication with the business. We have solutions, and we'll work on solutions with the Government of Quebec. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A brief reminder.
For Vancouver Kingsway.
To address the chair.
Mr. Speaker, before he was elected, the Prime Minister claimed to care about the climate crisis and protecting our lands and waters. BC Liberal MPs all said they supported the tanker ban in northern BC. Now we see them stealing pages from the Conservative playbook. Without consulting the Premier of British Columbia or First Nations, Liberals are reversing 50 years of protection for sensitive coastal waters, overriding the law and risking billions of dollars of economic activity. Why are Liberals sacrificing the BC coast and betraying the voters who sent them here?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker,
Our Prime Minister was very clear yesterday, and I think it's important to highlight that we will make sure, with any of the major projects that move forward, that we work with affected jurisdictions. That means all of the provinces, and we will work with Indigenous rights holders, respecting their positions and their rights. We will make sure that we continue to build Canada as a strong country, strong future for our country, and we will make sure that we do it well.
Hear, hear.
Et donc la période des questions est terminée.
This concludes question period for today.